Hey folks, this is Asus. In my last video we talked about my list of the top 10 non-weapon items that you can get in Act 1. In this video, the sequel, I will be talking about the top 10 weapons you can find in Act 1. The reason I'm picking specifically weapons in Act 1 is that I like equipment that you can find early in the game and use for most, if not all, the game. So the emphasis of my list is on weapons like that. I want weapons I can get early, I can equip on my character, and that will be useful and core to my build for the rest of the game. So let's dive right into the list now, starting with number 1, Phalar Aluve. By the way, just like my last video, I'm doing these in no particular order. They're not rank ordered or anything like that. It's just 10 items which I consider the best. Okay, Phalar Aluve. Phalar Aluve is this sword right here. It looks so cool. I love it. And it's extremely good mechanically. So this is a +1 longsword. You can find this in the Underdark, very close to the abandoned Selûnite outpost. It is stuck in a stone and you have to pass a fairly easy skill check in order to pull it out. Like I said, +1 longsword, +1 to performance, and interestingly, it's a finesse weapon. Longswords aren't usually finesse, so this is the only longsword in the game that I know of that you can use with dexterity rather than strength. It creates this interesting situation because you can find it so early, where it makes the best sneak attack weapon for rogues, because you can use it in 2 hands and you get 1 die 10 on a finesse weapon, which isn't really possible on anything else. But the animation, the sneak attack animation for it, doesn't work, so the game just glitches out. The attack goes through, it's still the best weapon, but you never actually get to see yourself make the attack, which is enough of an inconvenience for me that I don't use it even though it's optimal. Anyways, all of that is neat, but the thing that makes this weapon actually so good is its special ability. So, while you have it equipped, once per short rest, you can use one of 2 abilities: Shriek or Sing. So both of these are really good. Let's start with Sing, actually, because it's the most straightforward. The sword sings a melody. All allies within 6 meters of range have a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and charisma, wisdom, and intelligence saving throws. So this is like a non-concentration, unlimited AoE aura of the spell Bless. When you cast this, everyone within 6 meters is getting a comparable effect to Bless. They're getting that 1d4 bonus to their attack rolls, and they're getting a 1d4 bonus to some of the most important saving throws, but not all of the saving throws. So, like I said, it's comparable to Bless, except on everybody, and it's concentration free once per short rest. So it's not uncommon for me to spend my first action in a round with Shadowheart to cast Bless, and my second action in a encounter to use the Sing ability on Phalar Aluve. So now I'm giving 2 die 4 attack bonus to all of my Great Weapon Master strikers or my Sharpshooter strikers. Incredible. So that's awesome, but debatably Shriek is actually better. This is the kind of offensive variant of it. So when you use Shriek, all enemies within 6 meters of range have a 1 die 4 penalty to charisma, wisdom, and intelligence saving throws, and affected creatures receive an extra 1 die 4 thunder damage. Okay, so the penalty, particularly to wisdom saving throws, can be nice. It's like a bane effect to wisdom saving throws. But the really cool thing here is the bonus to damage for every creature in that area. And this is what I call an unlimited buff. Unlimited means everyone in the area gets it. And so naturally, these stack so well in summon comms, right? If you can pack a lot of actions into that 6 meter area, you're effectively multiplying that 1 die 4 thunder damage bonus on every attack. Or you could just have a few characters that make a ton of attacks in that area. And one of the classic strategies for this is Warlock Sorcerer combos who can quicken spell Eldritch Blast. It's a really good way to make lots of attacks. And this is, at least in theory, adding 1 die 4 thunder damage to all of those attacks. Now, I've heard mixed reports on this. Personally, I haven't done it because I just really haven't played with the Sorcerer Warlock combo that much yet. Just haven't had time. I've been exploring other builds. But I have heard from people on forums, some people say that Shriek does add the damage to Eldritch Blast Rays, and other people say it does not, so you'll have to try it for yourself to know for sure. I wish I had time to test this to let you know. Either way, it doesn't super matter. You get the idea of what makes this so good. It's a 1die4 bonus on so many actions if you build around it with a summon comp or with just having a lot of strikers in your party. Extremely, extremely good. So both of these, incredible. Sing, I'd say, is more likely to be good on your standard composition, but Shriek is the kind of ability that you can build around to make extremely efficient. Either way, these abilities stay relevant for the entire game. You can use this sword right up until the final battle, and it is powerful and efficient. So that is Phalar Aluve. Next up is Skinburster, probably my favorite weapon, although after doing fairly extensive tests with it, I've cooled a bit on what makes this so good. Still one of the best weapons you can find in Act 1. Skinburster is a halberd. Ignore the 1die4 necrotic damage, that's coming from something else in my item. It's just a +1 halberd that gives the Skinburster Force ability. By the way, you can find this as loot in the Inquisitor's room of the Githyanki Crash, and for everyone that's going to blow up my comments saying that the Crash is in Act 2, that is incorrect. The Crash is still technically in Act 1, so please do not tell me that. I've got like a dozen of those comments in my last video. Okay, Skinburster. So Skinburster Force, whenever the wielder deals melee damage with this weapon, they gain 2 turns of Force Conduit. What does Force Conduit do? Force Conduit reduces physical damage, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, by 1 per turn remaining of Force Conduit. And if an entity takes damage while it has 5 or more turns remaining, it deals 1 through 4 force damage in a 6-meter radius. This will hit allies, which is kind of a shame. That's one of the reasons I've cooled on it. So just to give you an example of what's happening with this, if I enter turn-based mode, you know what? I should pick a target with AC that isn't so high. Kill my Dark Urge here. He deserves it for what he's done. Okay, so I just hit an attack, and you can see I now have 2 stacks of Force Conduit. So that means I am reducing physical damage by 2 every hit, and then, because it's a halberd, you can combine this with the Polearm Master feat to get a bonus action attack with the butt end of your weapon. Still counts. Now I have 4 rounds of Force Conduit. That means I'm reducing physical damage by 4, and so on. And this can stack up extremely high if you weren't losing stacks when you take hits over 5. So that's one of the things that Skinburster does not tell you in the description. This is the same thing for all Force Conduit. When it says if an entity takes damage while it has 5 or more turns remaining, it deals 1d force damage. It doesn't tell you that it actually consumes 5 of your charges to deal that force damage. So getting the retaliation damage is nice. I would rather just keep the stack so I could just stack this up and up and up and up until I'm taking just no damage from physical attacks at all. But still, the damage reduction does stack quite a bit. It definitely offers you a lot of defenses, and that is just the value of this weapon. It's a pretty mediocre weapon when it comes to actually dealing damage, but an incredible weapon when it comes to mitigating damage. It just makes you so tanky, and you can just slowly wear down enemies with the damage reduction and the retaliation damage. That is Skinburster. I've said enough about that. Let's move on to the next one, which is Mourning Frost. Mourning Frost, this is a staff you can get in the Underdark if you assemble the 3 pieces that it's made up of. One of them you can find on Dorn, who's a drow you meet during the Beholder fight. It's not technically a Beholder. What do they call that Beholder-like thing? Spectator, I think maybe it's called. Yeah, so Dorn by the Spectator fight gives one of the pieces. The other is the Mad Wizard, I can't remember his name, that lives with the Hooked Horrors. You can find one piece with him, and then the last piece you can find in the Myconid colony in the room that you get access to as reward if you take out the Duergar. So that is how you assemble Mourning Frost, and here is what the weapon does. So it's a staff, a +1 staff that deals 1d4 cold damage. So ignore the acid and the bludgeoning, I'm getting that from other things. And then it gives you 2 abilities, Heart of Ice and Insidious Cold. Heart of Ice, whenever dealing cold damage, the wielder deals an additional cold damage. So this 1d4 cold damage per attack is actually 1d4 plus 1, averaging a 3 to 4 cold damage bonus per attack that you land. So already, this is a pretty good DPR item for when you get it, and it stays kind of relevant for a lot of the game. People use this as a spell staff, but it makes like a pretty good just attack with it weapon, to be honest. Then it also gets Insidious Cold. Dealing cold damage with the spell possibly inflicts chilled upon the target. Chilled, an infected entity, is vulnerable to cold damage and resistant to fire damage. So that makes it an even better just auto attack and deal damage staff, because there's the chance, and it procs fairly regularly, that you chill the target, making them vulnerable to cold damage. So this 1d4 plus 1 in fact becomes 2d4 plus 2, which will average around a 7. 7 bonus cold damage per attack that you make with Mourning Frost. So this is kind of a decent attack weapon. But then it also just works really well with spells. These 2 abilities, Heart of Ice and Insidious Cold, will proc on all of your cold spells. So for example, if you cast Cone of Cold, every target that you hit is now taking +1 cold damage. You're possibly inflicting the chilled condition on all of those targets, which sets them up even more for another Cone of Cold. Same thing goes with just spamming Ray of Frost. It gives you a lot of just passive damage boost to your Ray of Frost, and you can totally build around this if you, for example, go for a cold Draconic Sorcerer build. They'll also be adding your Charisma bonus to all of your cold damage, and it makes Ray of Frost, especially when you quicken spell it, a decent DPR option for your Sorcerer, which is great. I keep saying this over and over. You want ways to take efficient actions on your Sorcerer that aren't spending spell slots or sorcery points. And this is one way to do that. And you can get it very, very early in the game, which is incredible. So, cold builds are already good because of your ability to double the damage on cold spells through the Create Water condition, and Mourning Frost is actually a really good staff to synergize with those cold builds that you can get early. So, that is Mourning Frost. Next up on the list is Spell Sparkler, another staff which abuses the wet condition. I've got it right here. Spell Sparkler you can get as a reward for the Joaquin's Rest quest. This is a combat-free quest where you just free Counselor Floric from a burning building. I always do it very quickly because it's easy experience you can get without doing combat, and I like to just maximize all those, so I go into combat at high a level as possible early game. So I'm usually getting Spell Sparkler as one of the first items I grab in the game. What does it do? Well, it's just a quarterstaff that gives you Electric Veins. It's not even magical, it's not +1 or anything like that. Electric Veins, when the wielder deals damage with a spell or cantrip, they gain 2 lightning charges. Lightning charges are really good. When you have lightning charges, you get +1 to your attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage on your attacks or cantrips. And if you gain 5 charges, they are consumed the next time you deal damage, and you deal an additional 1 through 8 lightning damage. Now, getting 2 lightning charges per spell or cantrip that you cast is a really efficient way of stacking up lightning charges, especially if you are any class that's using Eldritch Blast. So Eldritch Blast is particularly good, of course on Warlocks, it's kind of the core of their kit, but it can also be good on Sorcerers. The reason Spell Sparkler synergizes with Eldritch Blast so well is that Eldritch Blast, as it levels, you get more rays on the spell rather than more damage on a single ray, and that is a vastly superior scaling for the spell. Because of things like this, more rays means you proc more on hit effects, and this is a really, really good on hit effect. 2 lightning charges on hit when you cast a cantrip. By late game, every time you cast Eldritch Blast, you're getting 3 rays, and you can do it multiple times, right? So if you're hasted, you can do it twice, that's 6 rays. If you use Quicken Spell, you can do it again on a bonus action, that's 9 rays. And then once you're doing 9 rays, that's the equivalent of 9 attacks, you can probably proc your Elixir of Bloodlust, which is giving you another 3 with the bonus action. So now we're at 12 rays in a turn, and it's not even that expensive. You just have to spend, I think it's 3 sorcery points to quicken cast, which is totally worth doing. So you can even just eat your spell slots just to use this strategy, because it's such a good strategy. And on each of those rays, right, so we had 12 in a turn, we're getting 2 lightning charges. If we hit all of them, which is fairly likely to be frank because of how accurate Eldritch Blast is, we could be getting upwards of 24 lightning charge stacks. That means the 1d8 lightning damage that you proc for every 5 charges, you're getting 4 of those in a turn. That's 4d8 lightning damage you're adding to your spell combo. And then you can get something equivalent to what we were doing with the Mourning Frost, where if we combine this with the Draconic Sorcerer subclass, we can start adding our Charisma bonus to any lightning damage we deal on spells. So even that +1 lightning damage from our lightning charges, by late game, is going to become a +7 because we're adding 6 from our Charisma, which you can get a 22 Charisma with very easy itemization. So yeah, it's just really, really good. Spell Sparkler, you get it basically at the beginning of the game, and it's adding so much to an Eldritch Blast build right into late game. Absolutely incredible. So both Mourning Frost and Spell Sparkler are really good for any kind of Eldritch Blast, elemental damage builds. Anyways, I've said enough about that. We'll move on to number 5 on our list, which is Soulbreaker Greatsword. Definitely one of my favorite items. I can't say it's my favorite. I really like Skinburster and Shatter Flail, to be frank, but this item's incredible. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because I love Lae'zel so much. She's by far my favorite companion. And this sword is just tailor-made for her. So let's take a look at it. It is a +1 greatsword, which is giving you an extra 1d4 psychic damage conditional. It's conditional because it only adds the 1d4 if a Githyanki is using it. And that's what makes it tailor-made for Lae'zel. You've got this Githyanki that already wants to go Great Weapon Master because she starts with that fighting style. So 1d4 psychic damage when Lae'zel wields it, or if you make your own Githyanki striker, it'll work for them. And then it also gets you Seldom Caught Unawares, where you gain +2 bonus to your initiative rolls. This is deceptively good if you don't have much experience with Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 actually rolls initiative on a 1d4. Not a 1d20 that you roll in tabletop. So that means every +1 boost to your initiative rolls on tabletop, that is a 5 percentage point increase to your chance of winning initiative. In Baldur's Gate 3, a +1 is a 25 percentage point increase to your chance of winning initiative. So a +2 is a 50 percentage point increase to your chance of winning initiative. You would have to have a +10 to your initiative rolls in tabletop for the equivalent boost. With this +2 initiative and the 14 dexterity that you're probably going to get on Lae'zel, you're already winning initiative fairly regularly. I still like to get more. I always take the alert feat on Lae'zel at level 6, at which point you basically never lose. This plus your dexterity plus alert, you basically never lose initiative. And now you have so much damage front-loaded in combat. You can just reliably take out priority targets in the first round of combat, and that's so invaluable. I mean, seriously, guys, it is really hard to quantify how crucial it is to just take out a wizard before they can cast any spells. And this sword really allows you to do that reliably. So, I mean, already we're talking about one of the best weapons in the game. And then we haven't even got to what makes it so prime, and that is the Soulbreaker special action that you get. And this is something I want you guys to be aware of, is the special actions. All weapons get some. I made a video in early access covering which ones are the best, and it still pretty much holds up. The only difference is that Tenacity isn't gated once per short rest anymore, so that actually makes Tenacity much better than I ranked it in that old video. But definitely check out that video. But also look and see if magic weapons are adding any special weapon actions, because a lot of them do, and a lot of the ones they add are quite good. Soulbreaker is one of the better ones. So this is a special attack, which is adding, I believe, extra psychic damage. I think it's your strength bonus on psychic damage, something like that. I'm not sure. Definitely play with that. Anyways, the added damage isn't what makes it so good. What makes it good is that if it hits, it forces a con save on the enemy against your strength bonus as a spell DC, is how I believe it works. And if it hits, the target is stunned for 2 turns. So a stunned target, besides just losing actions, 2 turns worth of actions, you also get advantage on all your attack rolls against them, which allows you to apply the best status condition in the game, which is dead. So, and you get this once per short rest. So once per short rest, your Lae'zel can just stun a target, and remember, she's winning initiative, so she can just stun them before they take any actions, and now she has advantage on her attack rolls against them, so she's probably going to kill them before the stun runs out. I mean, guys, this is so good. It turns Lae'zel into a hard carry for your composition around level 5 or 6, and it lasts for so long. And yeah, like, it lasts until she hits level 11 pretty much, in which case she's now making 3 attacks as an action. Lae'zel's just such a beast. It's really hard for me not to take her in my party. And this sword is one of the big reasons. So you probably want this in your runs. Where can you find it? You get it from the Kithrak in the Kresh. That's in the Mountain Pass or the Rosymoor Monastery. There is a Kresh. The Kithrak is the leader of that Kresh, not the Inquisitor. It's the one you fight or can fight right before the Inquisitor. They'll have the sword, Soulbreaker Greatsword, and I actually like to start the fight by disarming them with the command spell, if you can land it, because they will drop this Greatsword, and it makes the fight go way better, because when they have the Greatsword, they're getting the +2 bonus to initiative and potentially stunning you on round 1, and that actually makes the fight kind of difficult. It's really swingy if they win initiative. Okay, I've been gushing about Soulbreaker Greatsword and Lae'zel enough. Next up is Knife of the Undermountain King. This is a weapon you can buy in the Kresh, in the Rosymoor Monastery. I currently have it equipped on my assassin main character. This is a +2 short sword, already awesome. +2 is really good for this point in the game when you get it, around level 5 or 6. Besides being +2, it gives you 2 abilities, Organ Rearranger and Shadow Blade. Organ Rearranger is very simple. The wielder scores a critical hit when rolling a 19 rather than just a 20. When they roll 2 damage or less, re-roll the dice, taking the highest result. This is really good on any sneak attack build. Critical hits in general are kind of overrated. What they add for damage isn't that much, except in a few specific instances. And basically, those instances are anything with a lot of damage dice. So spells like Inflict Wounds, for example, where all the damage is coming from your damage dice. A crit is really clutch on spells. It's really clutch on smites from paladins because you're just adding a ton of damage dice. And it's really clutch on sneak attacks. So those are the builds where you want to be critting. And this is made for sneak attacks. Absolutely made for sneak attacks. So now you're critting about twice as much. And if you are attacking with advantage, which you usually are when you're sneak attacking, you're getting even more value out of this. So awesome. You're getting more value because you're more likely to roll that 19 or 20, right? And then also, whenever you're sneak attacking, you want to be rolling much higher on the dice, right? Especially when you're critting on a sneak attack, because if you roll a 1 on a sneak attack dice, that 1's doubled and now it's 2. Okay, so +1 damage from the crit on that dice. But if you roll a 3, it's now doubled to a +3. So you've added +3 damage for that dice, right? So when you're critting, you really want higher damage rolls on your dice. A low damage roll on a crit, on a sneak attack, such a bummer. And this is allowing you to re-roll that damage dice on those low numbers. That's adding a lot to your average damage. I mean, seriously, it's adding a lot. So, really good for sneak attacks already. And then you get Shadow Blade, where you have advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscured targets when you're using this blade. It can be a little finicky to proc this, but it's giving you more instances to either get advantage for that sneak attack proc, or to have advantage when you're attacking a target that you're already getting sneak attack anyways. You want that advantage because not only is it making you hit more often, it's doubling your chances of critting. Yeah, so this is just the sneak attack short sword, and sneak attacks desperately needed it. It's not that good as a strategy. In some builds, you can just ignore sneak attacking altogether and still get a ton of value out of like a thief dip or an assassin dip. But I really like the idea of sneak attack, especially on assassins, where you can get at least one crit. So Knife of the Undermountain King, ultimate sneak attacking weapon. Again, you can buy this from the vendor in the Crush. Alright, that's number 6, Knife of the Undermountain King. Number 7 is up next, the Titanstring Bow. So, Titanstring Bow, you can buy it from the merchant in the Zhentarim hideout. Okay? It's a +1 longbow that allows you to add your strength modifier as additional damage on the attacks. So, you're double dipping for damage. You're already adding your dexterity modifier to longbow attacks, and now you can also add your strength modifier. And I know what you're thinking. Your strength modifier is probably going to be low, because you're a dex build. Why would you invest in strength, right? And that's true, except some of your strength builds still want to make ranged attacks. So let's take Lathander, for example. Lathander is winning initiative because she's wielding the Soulbreaker Greatsword. However, some fights start with a lot of melee combatants, and you kind of want them to run at you, right? Because they're going to spend their turn dashing to get to you, wasting their action. Once they've spent their action dashing towards you, on your turn, you can just move up to them and attack them with your full attack. So you can see the situation where two melee combatants, they're within dashing distance of one another. You don't want to be the one to dash towards them because you're basically taking your action and you're handing it to them. You want them to dash towards you. So the best thing to do in that situation is to win initiative. Instead of spending your turn dashing towards them, you spend your turn attacking them with a ranged attack. They dash towards you. Now you can attack them. So there's all kinds of situations like that, where even as a melee attacker, you want to be making ranged attacks. So if you've invested in strength, you can use this Titanstring Bow, and now, even though your ranged attacks aren't the best attack option you have, they're still pretty good for investing in melee and strength builds. So Titanstring Bow is great for that. I had Titanstring Bow on my Lathander right up until the end of the game, and I got quite a bit of value out of it. However, even for ranged attackers early game, you can just drink elixirs of Hilldry and strength to boost your strength. There isn't an equivalent elixir for dexterity, right? So you can go a full dex build, drink an elixir of Hilldry and strength, wield the Titanstring Bow, and now you're adding +9 to the damage of all of the ranged attacks that you make, which is really good early game and stays relevant for a lot of the game. So this is a great ranged weapon for your melee builds by mid and late game. In early game, if you're willing to use an elixir on your ranged attacker, it's a really good bow early game. So Titanstring Bow, amazing. Next up is Herald, another ranged weapon. I believe I saw that. Yes, I have it here. This is another great ranged weapon you can get from the Zhentarim hideout quest. You get this as a reward for completing the Find the Missing Shipment quest, which is usually how you discover the Zhentarim hideout. So Herald also has just a funny name. Here's what it does. It is a +1 heavy crossbow. Heavy crossbow is a great ranged weapon because it has that base 1d10 damage. Base damage doesn't matter as much as people say, but it's still giving you extra damage, and we'll take that. So base 1d10, +1 crossbow, and then it gives Heraldish Doom. When you deal damage to a target with a ranged weapon, it must succeed a charisma saving throw or be baned for 2 turns. My experience is that this procs often. Notice it doesn't say has a chance to proc this. It just procs it on every attack as far as I know. So what does baned do? It gives a 1d4 penalty to all attack rolls and saving throws, okay? So now they're missing more often, and you've debuffed their saving throws, which potentially sets up some of the debilitating crowd control effects in this game. This is just so good. I mean, yeah, I just want to use this all game. It's not the best DPR ranged weapon, but the debuff on it is so good and it procs so often, it tends, in my mind, to be more valuable than if you just go for a high DPR weapon, even on your DPR focused builds. But more likely what you're going to do is slap this on a cleric or a wizard, and even though they're only making one attack, if that one attack banes an enemy, you've gotten a lot of value out of that attack. So really good. Let's move on now to number 9, which is the Shattered Flail. I'm just trying to find who I have it equipped on. Number 9, here it is. Number 9 is Shattered Flail. Again, one of my favorite items. We had this early access and I loved it. It felt to me like I was the only person talking about it. But now with new items in the game, it's even better than it was before. So Shattered Flail is a +2 mace. Maces are pretty good for being simple weapons. They do 1d6 bludgeoning damage. Now you're more likely to find targets vulnerable or non-resistant to bludgeoning damage than any other. And then maces also get the concussive smash ability, which can apply daze to targets. Daze gives disadvantage on wisdom saving throws. Any ability, weapon ability, that applies the daze condition is already going to be better than a lot of its competitors. Some of the most debilitating crowd control effects in the game target wisdom saving throws. Being able to get disadvantage on them, so good. So it's already good for that. And then it gets Yenagu's Gift. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yenagu's Gift, hitting an enemy with this weapon heals the wielder for 1d6 hit points, but they can go mad if they don't continue hitting an enemy each turn. If they're mad, they are hostile to everyone in the vicinity, so they may target allies, but the worst effect for this is that you just lose control of them. So even if they target enemies, they might start spending valuable spell resources that you were saving for something else. For example, if you have a paladin, they might smite a goblin with 2 hit points. And even though you've killed the goblin, it really sucks to lose that spell slot on a wasted smite. So you really don't want to go mad, you want to be attacking off every round if you're using Shattered Flail. So only run this on your strikers. Don't run this weapon on anyone who might want to attack one turn and then cast a spell the next. But what you get for this is just a ton of on-hit abilities. I mean, already it's a +2 weapon that you find so early in the game. By the way, you loot this from the Flint, again, in the Find the Missing Shipment quest. So +2 weapon very early when you're normally having +1s. That's really good. And then healing 1d6 hit points per attack. So good when you combine it with the Periapt of Wound Closure. Periapt of Wound Closure is an item I covered in my last video. It's so good, one of my favorite items in the game. Basically, it maximizes any healing effects that you get, among other things. So this 1 through 6 hit points you heal, which will average around 3 to 4, is a guaranteed 6 on every hit. So now you're healing 6 hit points every attack, and you can be attacking often in this game. If you're a fighter, for example, by late game, you're getting 3 attacks per action. You're getting hasted 2 actions. If you have the Elixir of Bloodlust, that is a potential 3 actions every round. So that's 9 attacks. So you're healing 6 times 9 hit points every round. You can start regularly out-healing the damage that you take with Shattered Flail. Now, realistically, by the time you reach late game, you're replacing Shattered Flail with the Sword of Chaos, which is the much better item with a healing effect, but you don't get Sword of Chaos till Act 3, and before then, you want Shattered Flail. There's another interesting interaction with Shattered Flail that I want to point out, which is that for some reason, you proc this healing on added damage effects to your attack. Now, that sounds weird, but the two that basically do this are smites and things like the cleric's extra damage. So, for example, this is a Trickster Cleric Shadowheart build. She gets Divine Strike Nightshade, which adds 1d8 poison damage on one attack in a round. And the way Larian's coded this, they count it as like a reaction. you can choose to do it. It doesn't take your reaction, it's just you can choose which attack to apply it to. And when it's coded that way, it counts as a different effect than your actual attack, and it will proc on-hit effects like the healing from Shattered Flail. So, Smite is the same way. So if I hit an attack and Smite, I'll actually proc the healing twice on that attack, giving me, with the Periaptive Wound Closure, 12 healing for that attack. So on Paladins and Clerics, you can choose to bump your healing off. So it's best on those builds for sure. Probably not Clerics, because Clerics might want to cast a spell at some point in a fight. But for Paladins, really good. So I have Shattered Flail on my Minthara build. She's getting this pretty regular healing every round. But if I ever take a lot of damage, I can spike my healing by smiting on my attacks. So now a hasted Minthara who uses the spell slots to smite can proc this die 6 healing 8 times in a round. 8 times. Another 4 times if you have the Elixir of Bloodlust. So you can heal from 1 hit point to basically max if you're willing to spend the spell slots to do it. It's so good. So good. And I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. I find that tanky effects like this one or the Skinburster Halberd, people don't talk about enough. So that is Shattered Flail, number 9. And number 10 on our list is the Blood of Lathander. Of course I have to talk about this one. This is a legendary, the first legendary weapon that you can find in the game. Now it's hidden behind a little puzzle and a pretty difficult strength check. Like it's a 25 DC strength check, and you can't add proficiencies because it's just a pure strength check, not an athletics check. And that makes the 25 DC really hard to beat. I find I have to save scum it a lot, and if you are playing a no reload run, it's kind of likely that you just get locked out of getting the Blood of Lathander. But if you can get it, really good weapon. So this is a +3 mace. By the way, you get this in the Rosy Morn Crush area. The first +3 weapon that you're going to find in this game. And there isn't higher than +3. +3 is max. On top of that, it's giving Lathander's Blessing. Once per long rest, when your hit points are reduced to 0, you regain 2 through 12 hit points. Allies within 9 meters also gain 1d6 hit points. So this 2d6 hit point healing, again, if you have the Periaptive Wound Closure, is an automatic 12 hit points of healing. Now, I don't usually combine Periaptive Wound Closure with the Blood of Lathander, because 2d6 is already a fairly reliable 7 healing, and that's kind of enough. The difference between 7 and 12 once per long rest isn't worth using your necklace slot. So I saved the Periaptive Wound Closure to combine with Shattered Flail. Yeah, so you're getting an instant burst of healing once per long rest whenever you're dropped to 0 hit points, which is basically burning an extra one of your enemy's attacks. That's very valuable. Then you also get Lathander's Light. You shed a holy light in a 6 meter radius, and fiends and undead standing in the light are blinded unless they succeed a Constitution saving throw. And I find that this lands very, very regularly. So blind on fiends and undead, a very common enemy type that we face. So good. But it's also shedding light, and if you don't know, entering Act 2, there are a lot of creatures that you will fight who are not only undead, but you need light to see them. It's basically any of the shadows or phantoms that you fight. Having to shed a passive light actually gives you a lot. Like that, you get a lot of utility just from that. And then you're blinding them if they don't make a Constitution saving throw. So good. Like a really good just passive CC effect that you get just from wielding this weapon. And then also, once per long rest, you can use Sunbeam. Now this isn't the full effect of Sunbeam where you can do it again every 10 turns. It's just one burst of Sunbeam, but still very good. Sunbeam's a 6th level spell, and you're getting this very early in the game. It does 6d8 radiant damage in a beam AoE. You could hit a lot of targets with this, and it potentially blinds creatures in its path. Yeah, so there's a con save. If they fail, you're going to do 6d8 radiant damage and blind them. If they succeed, you do half the damage and they're not blinded. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. But still a lot of radiant damage, a really good spell once per long rest that you're getting from this. So yeah, there's just so much going for this weapon. Really, really strong. And that is all 10 of the weapons on my list. I could do some honorable mentions though. I think the big one I want to do for an honorable mention is Staff of Arcane Blessing. This was one of the best items that you can get in early access, and I really expected it to be better than it is, but there's just so many good items that you can get in Act 1 in this game that I find it actually gets muscled out a lot of the time. But this is a staff that allows you to cast Bless once per long rest, I believe. Yes, that's correct. And then anytime you cast Bless, either with the staff or your regular Bless spell, it not only adds the normal Bless effect, but spell attack rolls will get an extra 1d4, so 2d4 total, making this really good for any team composition which is relying on spell attack rolls. So basically any team composition with a warlock or a sorcerer where you're wanting to get a lot of damage from your spell attacks, this boosts this. With 2d4, you basically hit every time. And that's why I was telling you earlier, your Eldritch Blasts, late game you can be doing 12 of them in a round, and you're probably hitting all of them because you're getting plus 2d4. Yeah, so at that point it's 95% chance of hitting or up. And that's just so good. So Staff of Arcane Blessing, a very good honorable mention. And I think the other honorable mention I want is the Adamantine weapons. Now, I'm really torn here because the Adamantine armors are so good for that reeling effect, which we talked about in my last video. I kind of like to just do 2 armors and leave it at that. But the Adamantine weapons can be good too. So you can get this in a longsword, scimitar, or mace variant. I think scimitar is best. What it gives you, besides being a +1 weapon, is Diamond's Bane, where your weapon hits on objects are always criticals. This doesn't do much in combat, except for taking out those very pesky spheres like that can call in reinforcements. You want to take those out early, and they have so many resistances that they're hard to kill, honestly. But with an Adamantine weapon, you can reliably kill them in one hit. Very valuable. Everything else is kind of meh. But the big thing is that it gives you the lethal weapon ability, which allows you to ignore resistances to whatever the damage type is of the weapon. So for the scimitar it's slashing, for the longsword it's slashing, and for the mace it's bludgeoning. But this is the really valuable effect, and it's the reason why the scimitar is the one to go to. Now, normally resistance to your physical weapon damage type isn't that bad, because if you're going to be facing a target with resistance to your damage type, you can kind of switch weapons. Like, there will be targets, for example, with resistance to slashing and piercing, but not bludgeoning, so if you just have a bludgeoning weapon, you can switch to that before the fight. And that will get you by in a lot of fights. If they just have full resistance to all physical damage, you probably also deal a lot of elemental damage on your attacks, because there's so many ways of adding elemental damage in this game through things like Caustic Ring or lightning charges and stuff like that. You probably have damage in your composition that's going to bypass their resistances. So it's not that important to have a dedicated weapon just for breaking resistance, unless you are a rogue. Rogue sneak attack is a lot of damage, and it's all physical damage. And because you're restricted to finesse weapons with it, you're pretty much restricted to slashing and piercing. So if I'm doing a team composition that's depending on sneak attacks, which I don't like doing, to be honest, but it's possible to have that, Adamantine Scimitar can be really important to have as a sidearm. So just switch it in when you're about to fight an enemy that is resistant to slashing or piercing damage. And for everything else, use Knife of the Undermountain King, which we just talked about. So I think that's it for my honorable mentions. This video's gone on long enough. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, I should make sure I say where I can get all of these items, because some people were really complaining to me last video that I forgot to mention a few. So we're going to go through the whole list right now. Number 1 we talked about was Phalar Aluve. You can find this in the Underdark close to the Selenite Outpost. Number 2 is Skinburster, the halberd. You can find this in the Inquisitor room in the Kresh. Number 3 was Mourning Frost. You have to assemble this from 3 parts. The first one you can find on Dorn by the Spectator. The second one you can find on the Mad Wizard by the Sussur Tree. And then the third one you get as a reward from the Myconid colony if you kill the Duergar. Number 4 on our list was Spell Sparkler. You can get this as a quest reward in Joaquin's Rest when you save Counselor Floric from the fire. Number 5 was the Soulbreaker Greatsword. You get this as loot from the Kithrak in the Kresh, that is the leader of the Kresh right before the Inquisitor fight. Number 6 is Knife of the Undermountain King. You can buy this from the Quartermaster in the Kresh. It can be sold to you or pickpocketed. Number 7 is the Titanstring Bow, which you can buy from the merchant in the Zhentarim hideout or pickpocketed. Number 8 is Herald the Crossbow. You can get this as a reward for Find the Missing Shipment quest, again in the Zhentarim hideout. Number 9, Staff of Arcane Blessing. Oh, number 9 was actually Shattered Flail. You get this looted from the Flind, again in the Find the Missing Shipment quest. Number 10 was the Blood of Lathander. This is in a secret vault in the Rosy Morn Monastery. You have to do a series of quests. I can't explain the whole quest and puzzle to you, but it's in there. And that's all 10 for my honorable mention. Staff of Arcane Blessing is found in the basement of the Arcane Tower in the Underdark. And the Adamantine Scimitar is made in the Grimforge quests. You have to find the Scimitar mold and a Mithril ore, and then use that on the Grimforge to make the Adamantine Scimitar. Alright, so that is the location of all of these items that I talked about. Please don't complain to me in the comments. Alright, that's it guys. Thanks so much for watching. I know some of you have been really begging for a tier list video. It is on the way. I've already recorded it. It will be, it should be here this weekend. That's my plan this weekend, unless something goes wrong. I have been kind of delayed because things have been going, things have been delaying me in my life. Real world stuff, members of my family being sick, I have to look after them. So, sorry about the delay on this video and the delay on the tier list videos. But it will not be much longer. Right around the corner, race tier list is on the way. And then I'm going to be fully kicking into gear, making tier list videos for you guys. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again. Catch you next time.